am your daughter.
The girl replied softly, her voice echoing through the room like a haunting melody. The one you sold. I've come to remind you of what you've given away. Nguwen's heart pounded in her chest. No, this can't be. The girl stepped closer, her presence growing stronger. You cannot escape the consequences of your actions, mother. The wealth you've gained is cursed. It will bring you nothing but misery. Once in the lush and vibrant village of Amaki, there lived a young girl named Nguwen. Amaki was a village known for its beautiful hills, sprawling farms, and peaceful people. Nguwen was admired by everyone for her striking beauty and helpful nature. Her long braids and radiant skin often caught the attention of the village boys, but she was more focused on her studies. Nguwen was a brilliant student, always at the top of her class. Her parents, poor farmers, were very proud of her and believed she would bring honor to their family. Despite their poverty, Nguwen's family was happy. They were content with the little they had, and they cherished their peaceful lives. Nguwen's best friend, Zara, was quite different from her. Zara wasn't as intelligent as Nguwen, nor as disciplined, but she was charming in her way. Zara knew how to manipulate situations to her advantage and often got herself into trouble. People in the village warned Nguwen, "Be careful with Zara, her ways will lead you astray." But Nguwen, blinded by their friendship, paid no attention to these warnings. One day, after school, Zara brought 2 plates of food to Nguwen. Nguwen was starving that day, as her parents hadn't been able to afford food for the day. Grateful, she eagerly accepted Zara's offering. Little did Nguwen know, Zara's gesture of kindness was only the beginning of a slippery slope. Nguwen and Zara grew even closer after that day. They spent their days together, walking around the village, talking about life, and daydreaming about their futures. As time passed, Nguwen began to notice that Zara always had new clothes, jewelry, and other luxurious items that neither of them could afford. Curiosity finally got the best of Nguwen. One afternoon, as they sat by the village stream, she asked Zara, "Where do you get all these things? Your family isn't wealthy, yet you always have something new." Zara hesitated for a moment, looking around cautiously before whispering, "I have a friend in town, Kule. He gives me these gifts." Nguwen was puzzled. But why? What does he want in return? Zara smiled mischievously, leaning in closer. "Nothing much. I just spent some time with him. It's no big deal." Still confused, Nguwen pressed, "But what if you get into trouble? What if you get pregnant?" Zara laughed loudly. "Don't be naive, Nguwen. I know how to handle myself. You should try it sometime, too. Life doesn't have to be so difficult if you know how to play the game." Nguwen felt uneasy. Deep inside, she knew that what Zara was suggesting wasn't right. But Zara's carefree attitude and constant luxuries made it seem so tempting. It planted a seed of doubt in Nguwen's mind that would soon grow. As time went on, Nguwen found herself being drawn further into Zara's world. She still excelled in school, but her mind was often distracted by Zara's stories of easy money and lavish gifts. One day, while walking through the bustling marketplace of Amaki, Nguwen ran into Bakari, a young and handsome man who had a reputation in the village as a palm wine tapper. Bakari was known for his charm and success. His family owned large palm tree farms, and his sweet palm wine was loved by everyone in the village. He had an air of confidence that made people gravitate toward him. As Nguwen and Bakari talked, he offered her a pair of golden earrings. "These are for you," he said, his smile revealing perfect white teeth. Nguwen, flattered by the attention, accepted the gift. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a line. Bakari had always been kind to her, but now, as they began to meet more frequently, their relationship took a turn. Soon, Nguwen found herself sneaking away to meet Bakari, where they would laugh, talk, and eventually, one day, sleep together. Nguwen had never imagined herself in this position. It felt thrilling and wrong all at once, but she was blinded by her feelings for Bakari and the excitement of it all. A few weeks later, Nguwen began feeling unwell. The signs were clear, but she refused to acknowledge them at first. Eventually, she realized the undeniable truth: she was pregnant. Panic set in as she rushed to Bakari's farm, hoping that he would help her through this. "I'm pregnant, Bakari," she said, her voice trembling. But Bakari's reaction wasn't what she expected. He looked at her coldly and shook his head. "That's not my child, Nguwen. I'm not responsible." Nguwen was devastated. The man she thought cared for her had turned his back on her. She returned home, feeling lost and ashamed. Her parents, unaware of her situation, continued to plan for her future. They had decided to send her to another village, Sawa, to learn a trade that could support her in life. They believed this would give her a better future, unaware of the storm brewing inside their daughter's heart. Nguwen left for Sawa with a heavy heart, carrying a secret that she didn't know how to handle. Her journey to Sawa would change her life forever. Nguwen arrived in Sawa, a bustling village known for its vibrant markets and skilled artisans. She was staying with her aunt, a stern woman who believed in hard work and discipline. As Nguwen tried to focus on learning a new skill, the burden of her pregnancy weighed heavily on her. Desperate and unsure of what to do, Nguwen sought out the village midwife, Mama Bello. Mama Bello was known for her wisdom and her ability to help women with unwanted pregnancies. Nguwen poured her heart out, explaining her situation. "Mama Bello, I can't keep this baby. Is there anything you can do to help me?" she asked, her voice filled with. Mama Bello looked at her with compassionate but firm eyes. "It's too late to get rid of the baby safely, my dear. You must carry it to term." Nguwen's heart sank at her words. But then, Mama Bello said something unexpected. "If you don't want the baby after it's born, there are people who will pay a great deal for a healthy child." Nguwen was shocked. "Sell my baby," she whispered, horrified. But as the idea settled in her mind, it didn't seem so bad. Maybe this was a way out, a way to escape her situation and start fresh. Nguwen wrestled with her thoughts for weeks. The idea of selling her baby seemed unimaginable at first, but as time went on, it began to feel like her only option. She didn't want to face the shame of being a young, unmarried mother. The promise of money also tempted her. By the time her baby girl was born, Nguwen had already made up her mind. Mama Bello had arranged everything. The buyer, a wealthy couple from a neighboring village, was ready to pay handsomely for the child. When Nguwen held her newborn daughter for the first time, she felt a strange emptiness. There was no bond, no maternal instinct, only the thought of the gold coins waiting for her. After breastfeeding the child, she handed her over to Mama Bello without a second glance. In return, she received 500 gold coins and a necklace adorned with precious stones. Nguwen looked at the money in her hands, feeling both relief and excitement. She had done it. She was free, or so she thought. With the gold coins jingling in her pocket and the jewelry sparkling around her neck, Nguwen felt a surge of power. She had tasted the life of luxury, and she wanted more. The ease with which she had made money by selling her child opened up new possibilities in her mind. Not long after, Nguwen found herself pregnant again, this time by a man named Yakubu, another villager who was unaware of her plans. When she informed him about the pregnancy, Yakubu reacted just as Bakari had. He denied responsibility and walked away. But Nguwen didn't care. She wasn't looking for support or love. She was already planning to sell this baby, too. She ran to Mama Bello with excitement in her eyes.
I'm pregnant again, Mama Bello,
she announced, her voice full of anticipation. Mama Bello looked at her with concern. Nguwen, be careful. Selling your children is not a path you want to continue down. It will lead to sorrow. But Nguwen was deaf to her warnings.
This is my life now, Mama Bello. I've chosen this path. Once again,
Nguwen gave birth, and once again, she sold her child. This time, she was paid even more, a staggering 2,000 gold coins and an assortment of fine jewelry. Nguwen was thrilled. She believed she had found the perfect way to secure her wealth, and she wasn't about to stop. Nguwen's newfound wealth turned heads in Sawa and Amaki alike. She wore the finest clothes, adorned herself in gleaming jewelry, and moved through the village with an air of confidence. To the outside world, Nguwen had succeeded. People whispered about her prosperity, envious of the young girl who seemed to have risen from humble beginnings to a life of luxury. But beneath the surface, Nguwen felt a growing void. Her once carefree spirit had been replaced by an insatiable greed, and the excitement of her early ventures began to fade. Each time she sold another child, the gold she received felt heavier in her hands, as though it carried a curse. There was no joy, only a dull sense of obligation to maintain the life she had built on this terrible secret. As Nguwen's wealth grew, so did her isolation. She distanced herself from Zara, her once closest friend, and avoided her family entirely. She was haunted by the memories of her first two children, wondering what kind of lives they were living with strangers. At night, she often lay awake, haunted by dreams of faceless babies crying for her. The riches she had amassed brought her no comfort. Meanwhile, the villagers grew suspicious. Some wondered how a simple girl like Nguwen could afford such luxury. The rumors of her selling her children began to spread, though no one dared confront her directly. Still, people avoided her in the marketplace, casting wary glances as she passed by. Nguwen noticed but refused to acknowledge it, pushing the thoughts out of her mind. One evening, while sitting alone in her spacious hut, surrounded by gold and jewelry, Nguwen was overcome with a strange sense of emptiness. She looked around at her material possessions, realizing that none of it made her happy. In that moment, she wondered whether all of this was worth the price she had paid: her children, her peace, her soul. As Nguwen wrestled with her thoughts, there came a knock at her door. Startled, she rose to open it, and to her surprise, she found her mother standing outside. Her mother, weary and aged, had made the long journey from Amaki to Sawa after hearing the rumors about Nguwen's newfound wealth. Nguwen, my daughter, her mother began softly, I've come to see you. I've heard things that worry me. Nguwen's heart raced, but she forced a smile. Mother, come in. Let me show you all that I've earned. You'll be proud of me. Her mother entered the home and sat down. She glanced at the fine rugs, the shining trinkets, and the ornate decorations. But instead of admiration, her face was filled with concern. Nguwen, wealth is not everything, her mother said after a long pause. I raised you to be responsible, to honor our family, and to find joy in hard work. But what you've done, this is not the way. Nguwen, defensive, crossed her arms. I've done what I had to do, mother. Life is hard. I didn't want to live in poverty forever. I've made a life for myself, and I don't regret it. Her mother shook her head slowly. But at what cost, Nguwen? What kind of life have you made? Your children, your flesh and blood, are gone. You've traded them for gold. Is this really the future you wanted? Nguwen turned away, unable to meet her mother's gaze. She didn't want to admit it, but the weight of her actions was starting to crush her. Her mother's words cut deep, stirring the guilt she had tried to bury. Before leaving, her mother took Nguwen's hand and said, "It's not too late, Nguwen. You can find a way back. You can stop this before it destroys you completely." After her mother's departure, Nguwen was left with her thoughts. For the first time in a long while, she began to question whether her wealth had been worth the sacrifices she had made. But she wasn't ready to give it up just yet. Nguwen decided to bury her guilt with more wealth. She thought that if she could just accumulate enough, she would finally feel satisfied. Shortly after her mother's visit, Nguwen found herself pregnant again. This time, she approached Mama Bello with a renewed determination. "Mama Bello,
I need to sell this child as well," Nguwen declared coldly.
But Mama Bello's expression was different this time. The old midwife, who had once facilitated Nguwen's terrible transactions, now seemed weary and burdened by guilt herself. "Nguwen, I can't keep doing this. It's not right. I've seen too many young mothers fall into ruin because of greed and desperation. This will destroy you." Nguwen clenched her fists, frustration bubbling inside her.
"I don't care, Mama Bello. Just find another buyer. This is my life now, and I'm not turning back."
Reluctantly, Mama Bello agreed, but she warned Nguwen that this would be the last time she helped. The buyer, a rich merchant from a distant town, was willing to pay an enormous sum for the child. When the time came, Nguwen gave birth to a healthy boy. As she held him in her arms, she felt a pang of emotion, something she hadn't felt with her other children. For a brief moment, she hesitated, staring into the innocent eyes of her newborn son. But the greed inside her won. She handed the boy to Mama Bello, and the exchange was made. The gold was placed in her hands, and her child was taken away once again. Nguwen's wealth had reached its peak, but her heart had reached its lowest point. She was now richer than she ever could have imagined, but she had lost all sense of peace. One evening, as she counted her coins, she heard a voice behind her. "Mother!" Nguwen turned sharply, her breath catching in her throat. There, standing in the doorway, was a young girl. The girl's eyes were filled with sorrow, and her face was eerily familiar. "Who are you?" Nguwen asked, her voice trembling. "I am your daughter," the girl replied softly, her voice echoing through the room like a haunting melody. "The one you sold. I've come to remind you of what you've given away." Nguwen's heart pounded in her chest. "No, this can't be." The girl stepped closer, her presence growing stronger. "You cannot escape the consequences of your actions, mother. The wealth you've gained is cursed. It will bring you nothing but misery." Nguwen tried to speak, but no words came out. She watched in horror as the girl faded into the shadows, leaving her alone in her opulent. The following days were filled with torment. Everywhere Nguwen went, she saw the faces of her lost children. Their voices whispered in her ears, and their presence haunted her every waking moment. No amount of gold could silence the guilt that now consumed her. Nguwen's downfall was swift. The rumors in the village grew louder, and soon, people began to speak openly about the woman who had sold her children for wealth. Nguwen became an outcast, shunned by her community. The villagers who once envied her now looked upon her with disgust and pity. Her wealth, once her pride, now felt like a curse. No one would do business with her, and the items she had bought with her ill-gotten money seemed to turn to dust in her hands. Nguwen's luxurious life crumbled, and soon she was left with nothing but the memories of her choices. In the end, Nguwen finds herself back in Amaki, living in a small hut, alone and forgotten. She had lost everything: her children, her wealth, and her dignity. All that remained was the haunting realization that her greed had led her to ruin. And so, The tale of Nguwen became a warning to the people of Amaki and Sawa. Her story was told to generations as a reminder that wealth gained through deceit and sacrifice of one's flesh and blood would only bring destruction. The once beautiful and promising girl was now a cautionary tale, forever remembered as the woman who sold her soul for gold. Years passed, and Nguwen's story spread throughout the villages of Amaki and Sawa. The once proud woman, now broken and forgotten, lived in seclusion. She avoided the village square, rarely left her small hut, and spent most of her days wandering the empty fields, reflecting on the decisions that had led her to this desolate place. One evening, as the sun set over the dusty horizon, Nguwen sat outside her hut, staring into the distance. The whispers of her lost children filled her mind, and she was overcome with an unbearable longing to make things right, though she knew it was too late. Or was it? In the twilight, an old woman approached her, someone unfamiliar, with a face lined by time and eyes that shimmered with wisdom. Her clothes were simple, but there was something mystical about her presence.
I've heard your story. The woman began softly. You have suffered greatly for your choices, Nguwen. But even now, redemption is not beyond your reach.
Nguwen, startled, looked up at the stranger, confusion and hope mixing in her gaze. Redemption, she whispered. How could I ever make up for what I've done? My children, I can never bring them back. The old woman knelt beside Nguwen and placed a hand on her shoulder.
True, you cannot undo the past, but there is a path forward. Your children are gone, but others still need you. The wealth you accumulated, the mistakes you made, these can be turned into something greater if you have the heart to do so.
Nguwen frowned, unsure of what the woman meant. What can I do now? I have nothing left. No one will listen to me. No one will trust me. The old woman smiled gently.
You know, Nguwen, you know the pain of greed, the burden of guilt, and the emptiness that wealth cannot fill. Teach others and show them the dangers of following the path you once took. Use what little you have left to help those who need it.
For the first time in years, Nguwen felt a spark of hope. The weight on her shoulders seemed to lighten, if only slightly. But how?
She asked. Start small, the woman replied. There are children in the village without parents, without homes. They need someone to care for them, to guide them. Use the wealth you have hidden away to build something good. An orphanage, a place where those children can grow up loved and protected.
Nguwen's eyes widened. The thought had never occurred to her. Could it be that she, the woman who had once sold her own children, might one day help others find a home? It seemed impossible, but the old woman's words planted a seed of possibility in her heart. Will they forgive me? Nguwen asked, her voice trembling. The old woman's gaze softened.
Forgiveness is not something you can demand. It is earned through action, through selflessness. It will not come easily. But if you dedicate yourself to this path, in time, people will come to see the change in you.
Nguwen thought for a long time, her heart heavy but determined. She realized that this was her last chance to make something of the life she had squandered. Perhaps she could not undo the harm she had caused, but she could at least try to bring some good into the world before her time ran out. Nguwen spent the next several months working tirelessly to build the orphanage. She sold the last remnants of her wealth, the jewelry, the fine clothes, the golden trinkets, and used the money to buy supplies and hire workers. Though she had become a pariah in the village, a few kind-hearted souls recognized her efforts and joined her cause. At first, the villagers were skeptical. They watched from a distance, unsure whether this was another ploy or a genuine attempt at redemption. But as the orphanage took shape and children began to move in, their suspicions started to fade. They saw Nguwen working day and night, caring for the children with a tenderness that surprised even herself. The woman who had once been driven by greed was now driven by love and guilt, seeking to make amends in the only way she knew how. Slowly, the whispers about Nguwen's past began to quiet down. People still remembered what she had done, but they also saw the change in her. She was no longer the arrogant, wealthy woman flaunting her riches in the marketplace. She was a humble caretaker, dedicating her life to those who had no one else. The children in the orphanage, too, came to love her. Though she could never replace the parents they had lost, she became a source of comfort and stability for them. Nguwen taught them the lessons she had learned the hard way, that true wealth was found not in gold or possessions, but in love, community, and selflessness. Years passed, and Nguwen's orphanage became a beacon of hope in the village. Children who had once been abandoned or forgotten grew up under her care, and many of them went on to become respected members of the community. Nguwen never asked for forgiveness, but in time the villagers began to respect her for the work she had done. Her story became one not just of greed and downfall, but of redemption and transformation. As Nguwen grew older, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She still thought of the children she had sold, and the pain of their loss never fully left her. But she had found a way to honor their memory by caring for others, by ensuring that no child in her village would ever have to suffer the same fate. On her final day, Nguwen sat outside the orphanage, watching the children play in the courtyard. The old woman who had visited her years ago had long since disappeared, but her words still echoed in Nguwen's mind. As the sun set on her life, Nguwen felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The villagers gathered to honor her, and though they still remembered her past, they also celebrated the good she had done in her later years. Nguwen's story became a lasting reminder to the people of Amaki and Sawa that no one is beyond redemption, and that even the darkest mistakes can be transformed into light if one dares to change. And so, the woman who had once sold her soul for gold was remembered, not for her wealth or her greed, but for her kindness, her humility, and her tireless work to care for those who had no one else. And so, the tale of Nguwen serves as a powerful reminder of the choices we make in life. Her journey from greed to redemption reflects the deep moral lessons embedded in the rich traditions of Middle Belt Nigeria, where community, family, and compassion are valued above all else. Nguwen's transformation teaches us that no matter how far one strays, there is always a chance to turn back, to rebuild, and to leave behind a legacy of love and kindness. In a world often consumed by materialism, this story challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Are we chasing after things that may bring temporary satisfaction, or are we cultivating values that will last for generations? Nguwen's ultimate redemption came not from her wealth but from her willingness to change, to care for others, and to seek forgiveness through action. If you enjoyed this story and its message of redemption, be sure to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more African folk tales that inspire, teach, and entertain. Let us know in the comments what lessons you took from Nguwen's journey. Do you believe in the power of redemption? And what other folk tales would you like us to explore? Thank you for watching. And remember, every story carries a lesson, and it's up to us to learn from them.
Stay tuned for more stories from the heart of Africa.